Welcome, everybody, to our Parrot Stars podcast. My name is Alexis Highland. I'm the manager at Parrot Stars, and I'm here today with two of my Parrot Stars teammates, Ashley and Avery.
Hello.
We're lucky, both Pionuses that we tried to put on the tree stand behind us for the episode have no interest in staying on it. So you might also hear the dogs walking around during our recording session. So I apologize in advance for our house full of animals right now. So today we want to continue our conversation about positive reinforcement training. In a previous episode, we kind of introduced what positive reinforcement training is and just the breakdown of like the benefits of it and how to just start completely fresh with a brand new bird or to kind of reset with an existing bird. So quick summary recap. Positive reinforcement training is rewarding a behavior that you want the animal or the parrot to repeat. So a good behavior gets a good reward, either like a food treat or a vocal praise, with the hopes that you're encouraging the animal to do that behavior again. Now, we also talked about like the value of taking it super, super slow, starting with just sitting in a chair outside of your parrot's cage, letting it see you, get used to your presence in the room. Once we've achieved that for a week or so, just one treat in the hand from outside the cage through the cage bars in the hopes that the bird will eventually come over and take the treat out of your hand. So that's kind of where we left off. So we want to just continue that conversation and give you guys more tools on how to build or rebuild the relationship you have with your companion parrot.
So there's a ton of value in taking it slow. And I know you mentioned just an example timeline. Maybe it does take a week of you sitting in that chair just to get the bird acclimated with your presence. Maybe longer, maybe shorter, but we're taking it slow enough that the bird is not seeing us as a threat. And I think sometimes folks get concerned that the bird is in the cage. I want it to come out. Maybe it's unhappy because it's being in the cage. And I think it's really important that we remember the cage is not a punishment. This is a safe and fun place for them. That's where their toys are. It's where their food is. And it's important that you have taken the time to pick an appropriate size cage for the bird so they have ample space to move around and play with those toys and do all sorts of bird things. Even though we want to start doing out of cage time, it's not a race to get them out. It's not a punishment to have them in there. It's really important to take it slow. So I'm glad you mentioned that and gave an example timeline of what that could potentially look like.
And I mean, the name of the game, as we've been saying over the past episodes, we've talked about clicker training is taking it slow, is because the slower you take it now, and like the less you rush the process, the calmer you are with the bird, and on a level head kind of sort of mindset that you're setting yourself up in the future, for a lifetime out of the cage and with the family and in the house.
Yes.
So not to just repeat what I say, but slow you are now in the cage. I mean, you're going to have a wonderful experience for a cockatiel, 20 plus years, larger birds, even more so, cockatoos, 70 years. So it might seem like an excruciatingly long time for the few weeks even a week or even month maybe at now, but you just have to look towards the future when it will be controlled and a smooth ride.
Totally. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Right.
Absolutely.
So the other piece of it is that every parrot is going to have its own timeline.
Right.
So you working with a very confident individual parrot, okay, because they're all going to be totally unique, might see that you can go at a slightly faster pace, but the actual breakdown, we still want you to go step by step. But I think the really important thing is that if it is taking weeks or months you cannot just abandon ship and get guilty and then just open up the cage door because you want the bird to just fly around. We're going to encourage that parrots are kept fully flighted. And yes, it is so important for them to exercise and continue their flight and explore and all of that. But it can't be before you're able to get it to step up or stay in a location or not completely flee you if you're walking towards it. So the intention behind wanting to take your parrot out when you first bring it home or let it out because it's been in its cage for 2 or 3 weeks, like the intention behind that is wonderful. We want you to love and care and think about your parrot's well-being. But it is okay to keep them in their cage while you're doing this reset or you're trying to build this relationship. It is okay. And again, I don't want to just like keep repeating, but I think it's so important. Like that is why you get the biggest enclosure that you can afford financially and space in your home. Like you have to. This is not something that's an option. There's a reason we are constantly encouraging people to either upgrade into a bigger enclosure or to invest one time in the right size enclosure so that the bird can have very dynamic perching, very enriching toys that serve different purposes, foraging toys, chew toys.
Foraging, yeah.
Yeah, there's so much that benefit to having a really dynamic enclosure that parrot's not going to perceive the time spent in its cage as a punishment. The cage is never a punishment. Mm-hmm. If you think it is, it's not. It's just, that's the plain and simple truth. It's where it feels its strongest sense of security. It's where its food and water are. It's where its toys are at. So it's okay to keep it caged while you're trying to start this relationship, as long as like the long-term intention is that we're keeping you caged now to build the relationship, to build the trust and the bond so that we can have years of time spent together outside of the cage. So don't get discouraged. And I think I have a pretty concrete example. We have a customer that's now almost 5 months into their Indian ringneck. And with Indian ringnecks, like they are so shy to start.
Yeah.
I mean, the way that we do our hand feeding at Parrot Stars is identical for every species. The way I feed a cockatiel is the same way I feed a hyacinth. Like everybody's coming out of the cage to be fed. They're all allowed to fledge appropriately. They're fed a dynamic diet. We try everything in our power to create confidence in them when they're young.
Yeah.
But with ringnecks, they're still nervous no matter what you do.
Absolutely.
This is just the nature of them. And every so often you might get lucky and there's a one-off, like really confident ringneck. But the average ringneck is very, very shy. And so I just spent, it was an 1.5-hour phone call with this customer that's almost 5 months in with her ringneck. And she's just feeling so discouraged because she can't touch it.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah.
But tell me more. Like what is happening? Well, it takes treats from her wonderfully.
Okay.
It moves around the cage. It plays with its toys. It's eating its chop and its veggies phenomenally. I mean, there are so many wins to what she is feeling with this companion parrot, but she's coming off of an experience with a past ringneck where she had instant gratification of touch day 3. Yeah. And now that one was clipped. And when she described it, she's like, I was able to pick him up right off the floor on day 3. Well, that wasn't probably because the bird wanted to. It was because it had no flight and it felt cornered and it just was helpless at that point. So now we're working with her second ringneck that's fully flighted, that is a little bit more of a nervous individual, and she's feeling discouraged. And so it was a really good conversation for me to have before we did this podcast recording, because I'm like, okay, this is a perfect example of why the breakdown of positive reinforcement training, it never gets old. Like you can always go back to it. So I told her, like, all right, it's taking you 45 minutes of chasing him around the room to get him back to his cage, but you have all these other areas that you're being super successful with him in. Let's stop letting him out all the time now. And let's work with trying to get him to step up for you inside the cage first.
Yeah.
And she was just, I could hear the guilt in her voice. Like, I can't, but he's used to being out. And it's like, I understand he's used to being out. And I want you to have the goal that you're going to keep letting him out. Like, don't lose that intention. But there's the reward and the benefit from building the relationship within the enclosure or the cage is going to so outweigh just the turmoil of that guilt-ridden, I'm going to pop the cage door open, let him fly around. And then we had 45 minutes of like a stressful chase to try to get him back in the cage. So continue to weigh pros and cons of all of this. But I think, again, just don't feel bad if like it takes, because you brought home a ring neck, like it takes 6 months to create a bond. Like that is a realistic time frame.
Yeah.
And if it goes faster than that because you're really working the positive reinforcement training the right way, wonderful. But don't get frustrated or disappointed in yourself or the bird if it's taking a long time.
Yeah. And I mean, especially with the ringnecks, they're notoriously cautious birds. And we see so many cool videos of them online playing peekaboo and doing some incredible things. And what we don't see is all the time that those owners invested in training that bird. And some species are going to be more confident than others. The Asiatic species, like the Indian ringnecks, they're just more cautious. So it's important to also know what you're getting into and to be mindful, kind of like you said, if we are having that 45-minute pursuit to get back in the cage or having to, I know sometimes people try to use like a towel or gloves to get their bird back in if it's not stepping up.
Yeah.
We are potentially damaging the trust we have built. Not always, but that bird might be more scared the next time we offer the treat if our hand had previously been using a towel to grab it off the ground just to put it back, you know?
Right.
So again, when you say weigh the pros and cons, we want to be able to safely get our bird back in the cage without, you know, escalating to either them flying until they're exhausted or us having to manhandle them in some way, because that can be really damaging to all the hard work we've put in from sitting next to the cage to getting them to take the treats. So I'm really glad you mentioned weighing out the pros and cons that way, because to have to grab them just so they could get out of the cage might not be worth it when they do have the space to exercise inside their enclosure. Taking that time and looking at that long marathon that comes with that patience.
Yeah. It's just to drive the point. I mean, again, the slower you take it now, the better it's going to be. And we say the same thing to any, you know, future bird owner, no matter what we know about the bird at Parrot Stars.
Yep.
So whether you got a little green cheek that's hopping around, stepping up, flight recalling, you know, flipping over on its back, or to a ringneck or even another green cheek that's, you know, very
so
timid and shy. And every time you even kind of look at it, you can see his eyes get wide and he starts looking for places to fly to or does fly everywhere and all about. We say the same thing, you know, just take the time, however long you need for that bird.
Investing in quality toys is really important too, because if you do have a nervous bird that maybe when you go to just change the food and water, it starts panicking and flying around the cage, you want to make sure you've picked out quality toys so that you can take the time to not have to get your hands in there prematurely and potentially scare them more. With ringnecks, sometimes they get nervous when our hands come into the cage. So if you pick out some high quality toys to start off, and the bird maybe, like you said, is in the cage for weeks, they're going to be fine because they still have things to do in there, and we don't have to prematurely get our hands in and potentially create a stressful moment where we could have avoided it.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think maybe we'll drop a little teaser for a future episode. Hopefully we can get the Parrot Wizard back on this podcast. I'm sure he'd be willing to do so, but even not, I think a teaser for a future episode is we're going to describe what we did for our summer festival, where if you don't know the Parrot Wizard, he's a very experienced and well-established animal behaviorist and specifically parrot trainer. And we sent him 3 parrots 30 days before our summer festival for him to train and use the positive reinforcement training and evaluate what does 30 days look like for 3 totally different species. So we sent him a cockatiel, a sun conure, and an Indian ringneck. And the results were so different for each bird.
Yeah.
I mean, it was remarkable. And I know with certainty, because he's done a lot of videos, he did the same mechanism of positive reinforcement training and did the same steps for each birds.
Right.
And the pace at which the birds accepted the next step was completely different. I mean, he took a cockatiel and had it completely willingly walking into a harness, fully harness trained in 30 days.
I know.
Yep.
And what he was able to achieve with the ringneck in that same 30 days was not even taking it out of the cage, like getting it to step up onto his finger within the cage, moving his hand just outside the cage door and putting it right back in.
Right.
Like, and that's somebody that has years and years and years of experience. And it's not the mechanism of training. It's just that's the nature of working with complex, intelligent animals with different confidence levels. Like each one is going to look or is going to respond to the training differently. And again, humans are complex and we're very motivated. And a tricky thing is that often we're comparing ourselves to one another. So maybe you're on the different forums or online and you're looking at people's different social medias that you know that they got a bird. And at that point with their own bird, they were much farther along than where you are at with your bird. And you can't do that to yourself. You cannot compare a totally unique situation to a different situation. The environment of the household is different. The bird is an individual. The person is different. I mean, there's too many variables with all of this to ever get disappointed if you're trying to compare, like, why is this person so successful and I'm feeling like I'm not making any progress? You will make progress if you're doing positive reinforcement training. It will happen. It just might not be 3 days after you bring the bird home,
Right.
or 3 days after you try to do your reset with your existing parrot. Like it could take a long time for sure.
But seeing what the Parrot Wizard did was really cool because it kind of put things into perspective, like being all laid out in front of you and hand holding. But even though that's the general trend with the ringnecks or Asiatic species, and then maybe most of the cockatiels are pretty more laid back, it can go vice versa. So don't see what other people can achieve with a little cockatiel in 30 days and then expect yours can do the same, because your cockatiel might be super shy.
Yeah.
But anyways, I think it's just important. This point we're driving is you got to take that slowness in the beginning to understand your bird's kind of personality and body language, get to know your bird. But to reel it back to the positive reinforcement training is maybe, even though we're talking about, all the out of the cage time and maybe just the simple things about not getting your bird to flail around when you change the food and water, after you've sat next to the cage, after you've established a presence of comfort, and then after you've been introducing treats and they're maybe starting to take it, what are the next steps we can maybe shift to if your bird is to that point in a comfortable manner that you can, focus on?
Yeah. So after you're just trying to get the bird to take treats from your hand, one other quick thing I want to mention is like nobody enjoys getting bit by their bird. Okay. But if you don't want to have your first interaction with your parrot be it nipping or biting you because it's terrified of you, like having the next step after you sit in the chair and let it get used to you, you're using the cage also as a tool. And that's going to be something that we're going to talk about today is like all of the tools you can use for positive reinforcement training. So the cage is a tool. We're going to introduce the clicker here in a moment. In a future episode, we'll talk about the target stick. everything that we're going to talk about, these are tools to keep literally in a literal and metaphorical toolbox to help you create that trust. So if we are going to just take biting out of the scenario altogether, because biting should be a non-issue. We should never be putting our parrots in a position where they have to bite. But if you have the treat in between your index finger and your thumb, and it's a big treat, and you're putting it through the cage bars, it's going to be virtually impossible for that bird to sidestep that treat and grab you. So not only are you encouraging the bird to trust you, you knowingly or unknowingly are going to start trusting the bird because you're putting your hands towards the bird and it's not biting you. So it is a mutual trust building situation that you putting yourself in a position where you cannot get bit physically. It's impossible for them to grab you through the cage bars. You're going to start trusting your parrot. You're going to take away that little gut instinct to kind of do that polar drawback. And you're going to get to see like, okay, parrots don't have hands. They use their beak for everything. They're always going to reach forward with their beak. Some people are very okay with that and it doesn't spook them at all. And yet other customers who are so well-intentioned, like don't get me wrong, they have great intentions, but we're instinctual beings too. And we might do that little hesitation or pullback. So you're using the work outside of the cage to build your own trust with the parrot as well. So your cage is your first tool. Now we are going to introduce the second tool, which is the actual clicker. So can one of you just describe like what is the physical object that a clicker is and what is its purpose?
So the clicker is a little rectangle or circle tool that when you press on it, it makes a clicking sound. It is a very distinct sound, which is why it's used in positive reinforcement for any animal, really, because it sounds the same every time it's used. And when we introduce the clicker, we are doing so, of course, very slowly, but we're pairing it with our treats, and the goal being that the clicker is going to be used to help support what we're doing with training and to give the bird clarity that when they hear that, it is marking the exact moment in time, the exact behavior that bird did. And they are going to learn when I hear that click sound and I get that treat, that moment is what I'm being rewarded for. So it gives so much clarity to them.
So using the tool of the clicker, like what was mentioned, and it's a universal language. All right. It's a little click. It's pretty straightforward. But what we hear from a lot of people is, I don't use a clicker because my bird's scared of it.
Yep.
Well, you maybe should start to implement the clicker because it is that universal tool for anybody and everybody. But just a simple way to reintroduce it, that isn't scary and upfront in the bird's face. It's just to do something simple like putting it behind your back.
Yep.
Keeping it out of sight at first, being very cautious because they just hear it. Great, awesome. I don't see it. It's not a big like sonic boom in my face because it's, you're clicking right in front of them. And that's just a pretty easy way to reset for the clicker training to get your bird comfortable. And then eventually you can slowly, to your side, down, your other arms down by your thigh, something like that. And then eventually get it up there with the treat and whatever you're using for the training.
Yeah, I know new clickers, like brand new clickers, can be a little stiff when you go to press them, and the click can sometimes be really loud because you're pressing hard on it. Once you start using it more, it's not as loud, but you can also even like wear sweatpants and have your hand in that pocket and click to muffle that early sound.
Yeah, I didn't think about that.
Because just when they haven't been clicked before, they're going to be a little bit louder, a little stiffer. We might have to use a little bit more effort. But the behind the back trick is really useful too, especially if you have a bird that's weary of new things in their environment.
And it does sound trivial, but like what you just said is it just takes once. Maybe you do put the clicker right in the bird's face because you always hear how good of a tool it is.
Yeah.
And then you kind of put a big dent in the experience on your training strategy because the bird just gets spooked. And then you got jumping around, flailing around.
Yeah. And gosh, there's so much to say, but
Yeah.
parrots are prey animals. Like they're responding out of instinct 99% of their day. Like they're afraid of everything. And I think for me, that's like something that's so important to me. And it's going to be a trending theme through a lot of what I talk about in this podcast. And is that like, give them some grace. Like they're just afraid so much of their day. And what we're describing is the desensitization of the clicker, of your physical body, of your hand coming towards the cage. So yeah, you just said it might sound trivial, but we can't reiterate enough like the value in like just remembering and taking your time to sit there and think like, let me really sit in my parrot's shoes and their point of view. How are they perceiving everything that I'm doing? Even though your intention or the parrot owner's intention is so grounded in like positivity and willingness to create a relationship, you just gotta go slow. And then where people constantly say, like you just said, my bird doesn't like the clicker, doesn't like its treats. Yes, parrots have the capacity to like or dislike things, but very often it's not like or dislike. It's fear or trust. It's those two things. Yeah, maybe they might have preferences over time, but when you're first bringing a bird home, it's not just making a very like thoughtful decision. Like, you know what? That clicker is pink instead of blue. It's loud instead of quiet. I just don't like the sound of that clicker. And it's not that. It's either scary or it's not. So in everything that we're talking about with positive reinforcement training is like, how do I make myself as least scary as possible? How do I make its cage least scary and the clicker? So yeah, if you've had a negative first time experience with the clicker and it didn't go the way you wanted it to, it's okay. That's what we're here for. That's what this discussion is for. You can slow it down and we can start again. It's never too late to kind of reintroduce it. So yeah, I think you gave a really great definition of what the clicker is used for. And I think, again, we want to introduce the term bridge too. Like, I don't know if you mentioned it being a bridge.
I didn't yet.
Okay.
I didn't want to get ahead of myself.
Okay. So the clicker is just making a direct association, kind of like Pavlov's dog, okay? We all know that story of like the dog heard a bell, and when they heard the bell, it got its food. And then eventually, every time they heard a bell, the dogs would salivate because they were expecting food.
Right.
So it's the same theory, and that's, again, positive reinforcement training that they did with Pavlov's dog. And that's why the clicker is such a great tool, is because you are purposefully trying to create an association in the bird's brain that when it hears the click, it is anticipating a reward. And it's just, like you mentioned, signaling to the bird that right there, what you just did was the behavior I want you to repeat. And that's the behavior you're going to get rewarded for time and time again. And again, we have to keep this conversation going in future episodes, but it's just, that's the starting point with the clicker, is just like, let them get used to the sound first, let them get used to it, make it less intimidating. And then you're just, as soon as it touches the treat with its mouth, you give it a click. And now we're starting to associate getting a reward with hearing the sound of the click.
Yep. It marks that moment. And then, like you said, it bridges the time between the reward and the sound. So it's so useful that way. And it's important to keep trying.
Yeah.
Usually when people say their bird's scared of the clicker, they've only tried it like once or twice.
Yep.
So.
But just to add into this introductory clicker, a comment is, and we can definitely expand upon it, but everybody and we mentioned the word universal, is because it is a universal language that the bird will eventually understand no matter who clicks it.
Yes.
People say, I train, and then when, my friend or whatever, does family member trains, the bird doesn't respond to the same stuff. It's different language, different personality, different mannerisms.
Absolutely.
This is a very solid, static thing that the bird will understand no matter who it is.
Absolutely.
But I feel like that was a good a point to make for this introduction, because that's one of the biggest things we hear at Parrot Stars for the clicker training. But anyways.
Yeah. So, gosh, we could keep going for hours and hours
Yeah.
with these conversations. But this podcast is meant to be a resource for people to come back to. Hopefully you guys can listen multiple times if you don't mind the sound of our voices. So our goal here is to kind of step by step give you a breakdown of how to create a better relationship with your parrot. So we are going to continue to dive in all areas of parrot care, nutrition, continue the conversation about safety, talk about conservation and wild parrots. The topics are endless, but I think we all can agree, this is the clicker training, the positive reinforcement training. This is what's going to actually give people the hope and the confidence that they can do better with their bird or create a really long lasting relationship with their bird. So we have a lot of topics to cover. But if you guys have suggestions or ideas, the listeners, about what we should be talking about in this podcast, feel free to leave a comment or shoot us a message, because we're very open to suggestion. We want this to be a community-based effort, and we love our Parrot Stars community, and we're so grateful that so many people are listening in and tuning into the podcast. But I will always ask that if you are enjoying our podcast, please rate and review it, because it's a great way to kind of continue to get our podcast out there to new listeners. And downloading the podcast also helps us get a nice little boost. And then, like I said, just continue to follow along as we continue to dive into these somewhat complicated topics. But hopefully you're finding that we're going to give you the resources to create a really great relationship with your companion parrot. So again, thank you to Ashley and Avery working on their day off, and Julian behind the scenes producing for us. And as always, Ashley.
As always, be kind to your parrot and they will be kind to you.
Thank you guys.
Thanks.